Riverside is a typical suburban town, quiet and peaceful, like an ideal family portrait. In this community, James Miller and his wife Sophia are the recognized model couple. James is a well-known real estate developer in the area, and thanks to his sharp business acumen and negotiation skills, his career has flourished. His properties are scattered all over town. Whenever he plays golf or attends community events, James is always the most noticeable person in the room. Whether it's clients or neighbors, everyone admires him, even with a hint of envy. Sophia, a full-time homemaker, is the star of the community as well. She takes care of every corner of their home with unwavering dedication, ensuring that their children grow up in the best possible environment. At every school event, Sophia is always the first to step up to help organize. Every year during the charity bake sale, she is one of the main contributors. Her gentle smile and selfless commitment make her the ideal mother in everyone's eyes, and people admire her balancing ability and impeccable household management. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. James and Sophia's marriage was once the epitome of a perfect union in Riverside. James came from a modest background, with hard-working parents who instilled in him values of perseverance and resilience, despite their financial struggles. After graduating from college, James quickly found his footing in the real estate industry, leveraging his intelligence and relentless drive. Over time, he not only accumulated wealth, but also became a prominent figure in the local business scene. Sophia, on the other hand, came from a more affluent family. Her father was a lawyer, and her mother worked as a social worker. Their family life was secure and comfortable. Sophia had worked in marketing early in her career, but chose to leave her job after marriage to focus on raising their children. She devoted herself wholeheartedly to her family, never regretting the sacrifices she made, instead seeing it as her duty as a wife and mother. In the early years, their marriage was filled with love and idealism. When James's career was just starting, Sophia was always there to support him, even accompanying him to many social events. Together, they planned their future and enjoyed the warmth of family life. However, as James's business began to flourish, his lifestyle began to change. Frequent business trips, endless work calls, and a perpetually packed schedule slowly wore him down, leaving him physically and mentally exhausted, unable to focus on his wife and children's needs. Sophia also noticed the growing distance between them. The once passionate and idealistic man who worked tirelessly for the family was becoming more detached. Even when James was at home, he seemed to be absorbed in his work, with his phone always by his side. The dinner table that once echoed with conversation now felt empty and cold, with Sophia sitting alone, staring at an ever-quiet household. Over time, their relationship became increasingly distant. While James achieved success in his career, he found himself longing for a simpler, quieter life. His growing anxiety about balancing work and family weighed heavily on him. What was once a close-knit marriage had been eroded by the daily grind, leaving behind a void that neither of them knew how to fill. Emily Foster was a newcomer to the town of Riverside, having moved there with her 5-year-old son Jack after a painful divorce. She decided to start fresh in this quiet town. Her background wasn't complicated. She had once been a full-time mother, but after the divorce, she had to take on the responsibility of raising her son alone. In order to create a better life for Jack, she sold her old house and relocated to a completely different environment, this peaceful and warm community. When Emily first arrived in Riverside, life wasn't easy. She had been a woman focused on family, but now she had to learn how to face every challenge independently. Instead of letting these difficulties defeat her, she grew stronger and more confident. She found a job at the local school teaching kindergarten and quickly integrated into the community. Her warmth, patience, and meticulous care for her son made her the good mother everyone admired. The first time James noticed Emily was at a charity dinner organized by the community. On that day, Emily wore a simple yet elegant blue dress and attended with her son Jack. She appeared completely different from the other mothers around her. She wasn't pretentious or trying to show off. Instead, she was natural and warm, greeting everyone she met with ease. Her smile was sincere, and her movements exuded a sense of calm and grace. James was chatting with a few business partners when suddenly he heard a gentle burst of laughter. He turned his head and saw Emily standing with a few other mothers while Jack stood beside her, quietly playing with a toy. She didn't act as though she was trying to be the center of attention, but instead she seemed perfectly at ease and composed. In that moment, James felt a spark of attraction. Although he was used to being surrounded by many women in social settings, Emily's charm and her independence made him feel a curiosity he hadn't experienced before. Later that evening, during a break in the dinner, Emily happened to be standing at the same table as James. They exchanged a smile and then began a simple conversation. Their discussion started with the topic of children's education and gradually shifted to their own lives and past experiences. Emily didn't boast or make any grand statements. She simply expressed her views on life and her hopes for the future. James was moved by her calm, strength, and sincerity, feeling an ease he hadn't felt in a long time. Their conversation lasted about 10 minutes. Although brief, it left a lasting impression on James, and he couldn't help but feel a quiet, growing interest. Emily didn't shy away from his gaze, and instead, her eyes conveyed a sense of understanding and attention. This warmth made James feel incredibly at ease. Though their exchange wasn't profound, that brief conversation planted a seed in James's mind. He found himself increasingly paying attention to Emily, looking for her presence at community events. Each time they crossed paths, he couldn't help but steal a few glances at her. This quiet interest began to grow, and he couldn't ignore it. Since that brief conversation at the community event, James and Emily's relationship began to evolve into something subtle and complex. Initially, their exchanges were just simple text messages and phone calls about everyday matters. James's increasingly busy work schedule and the growing dullness of his marriage left him often feeling empty, while Emily, still lonely after her divorce, longed for outside affection and understanding. Neither of them realized that this kind of contact would eventually become something uncontrollable. At first, the texts were just small talk, the kids' school situations, the weekend community event arrangements, and even advice about cooking and gardening. Every time his phone screen lit up, James couldn't help but take a second glance. Emily's messages were concise yet warm, almost like a response to his inner loneliness. She wasn't overly sentimental, but there was something comforting in her words. That long-missed feeling of being noticed made James linger in the exchanges, as though he had found a brief escape from his family responsibilities. For Emily, she gradually found herself drawn to this relationship as well. She wasn't actively seeking a new romance, yet James's concern made her feel a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. In their interactions, she felt understood and valued, as if her past pain and loneliness were soothed by his words. Every text message, every brief phone call, made her feel a sense of connection that she had been missing for years. As time passed, their communication began to surpass the typical neighborly exchange. They started meeting in a secluded spot, an abandoned cabin on the edge of the town's forest. This place, far from the hustle and bustle, was hidden and quiet, the perfect location for their private meetings and brief escapes from reality. Every time they met, they talked about everything, sharing their pain, desires, and deepest fears. James confided in Emily about his growing dissatisfaction with his marriage, explaining how distant he felt from his wife, while Emily opened up about her isolation since the divorce and the challenges of raising her child on her own. These secret encounters soon became an addiction. The temporary escape they provided was thrilling, yet increasingly hard to resist. Each meeting brought a new rush of excitement that overwhelmed them both. Emily's every smile, every soft touch, drew James in deeper, while her words, full of attention and care, made Emily feel loved in a way she hadn't since before her marriage fell apart. In this relationship, both of them found emotional solace that was missing from their daily lives. James found himself drawn to a woman other than his wife, while Emily experienced a sense of emotional connection that had eluded her. Their bond grew from simple exchanges to something far more intimate, and their emotions toward each other deepened. Though both knew their connection was dangerous and complicated, they couldn't stop it. Every encounter left them wanting more, and neither of them could pull away. Gradually, their secret relationship became an inseparable part of their lives. They began to rely on each other, seeking fulfillment in a way that neither of them had found elsewhere. This mutual emotional dependency drew them into a never-ending cycle, where every meeting only made them crave the next. The excitement and the thrill of this forbidden connection had become an overwhelming force, and their lives were now intertwined in a way they could never have anticipated. Sophia gradually noticed something was off with James. The husband who used to be busy with work but still made time for her and the kids had become distant. No matter how hard she tried to reach out, James seemed absent, his expression always clouded with an air of exhaustion. She noticed that he started disappearing frequently, especially at night, telling her he had to work late or attend business functions. But each time he returned, the smell of perfume on him and the delay in his return time made her increasingly uneasy. She instinctively felt something was happening, but she didn't want to believe her suspicions. Whenever she tried to talk to James, he would always respond with a distant, tired gaze, making her feel as though she was no longer important to him. His phone was always in hand, especially at night. He seemed to be constantly checking messages or secretly taking calls, and these small details made Sophia feel more and more suspicious. So she began secretly investigating James's whereabouts. She observed his every move, noted down the times he left the house, and even started checking his phone for call logs and messages. One weekend, she finally found the clues. When she opened James's phone, she discovered several text messages between him and Emily. The words were brief, flirtatious, yet full of unspoken passion and innuendo, making Sophia's heart drop. Shock and anger flooded her heart. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Everything she thought was perfect now seemed like a beautiful lie. She had always believed that her marriage with James was unbreakable, but now she realized it had only been a fragile illusion. Emily, the new woman who had just moved to town, had become the unspoken third party between them. Sophia's emotions quickly shattered over the next few days. The pain of betrayal was almost unbearable. She felt deeply isolated and abandoned, and the sense of being ignored made her feel like her heart had turned to cold stone. She couldn't understand why James would so easily give up the life they had built together. It made her question whether there had always been cracks in their marriage from the start. The emotional weight only fueled her growing frustration. Anger and sorrow tangled within her. She couldn't stand the feeling of being deceived, and the thought of revenge began to grow quietly in her mind. She began to think about how she could make James feel the same betrayal and pain. The man she had once loved now seemed like a stranger, cold and indifferent. Sophia knew she could no longer endure this marriage, but the pain and anger inside her made it impossible for her to stay calm. She was slowly descending into a dark abyss with no way back. In the scorching heat of a July weekend in 2021, Riverside was enveloped by the relentless sunshine. The air was thick with unbearable humidity, and the streets were nearly empty, as if the peaceful community was concealing unspoken turmoil beneath its surface. Sophia had made up her mind to follow her instincts. She could no longer sit idly by. Ever since she discovered the affair between James and Emily, the pain of betrayal had consumed her, burning away her rationality. Today she was determined to confront the truth. She had followed James the entire day. As evening approached, she saw his car parked outside Emily's house. Her heart skipped a beat, and a strange surge of energy coursed through her body. Her instincts told her that tonight she could no longer avoid this confrontation. Without hesitation, Sophia walked into Emily's house, barely leaving herself a moment to think. The door was slammed open, and she saw James and Emily sitting together in the living room, their atmosphere unusually intimate. James froze upon seeing Sophia, his face immediately awkward, while Emily appeared even more frightened, standing up quickly in an attempt to explain herself. But Sophia's emotions had already spiraled out of control. She felt an uncontrollable rage rising within her, instantly abandoning all reason. She rushed toward James, her eyes filled with fury, lifting a wine bottle and smashing it over his head. The sound of glass shattering was like a signal for the collapse of her inner world, and as the wine splattered, Sophia lunged at him again, grabbing a chair and violently smashing it onto James. James tried to dodge, shouting, attempting to stop her, but Sophia was beyond restraint. She was no longer looking at him as the husband she once loved, but as the stranger who had betrayed her. She put all her strength into using every object in sight to strike him, her mind only focused on making him feel the pain of the betrayal she had endured. Emily, terrified by the scene, froze and screamed, but was powerless to stop it. She quickly ran out the door and into the neighbor's house. There she dialed 911, her voice trembling with fear and helplessness. James finally couldn't take the onslaught anymore, collapsing to the floor with blood pouring from his wounds. Sophia stood beside him, panting heavily, her body exhausted, but the anger inside her had not dissipated. She said nothing, just stared down at him as he lay motionless, until the distant sound of police sirens grew closer. The sound of police sirens shattered the quiet streets. Within 10 minutes, several police cars and an ambulance arrived at the scene, and neighbors peeked through their curtains, eyeing the unfolding events. The scene was chaotic, with bloodstains marking the floor where James's body lay motionless, showing no signs of life. Sophia, restrained by several officers, stood still, watching everything unfold without any expression, as though she felt no remorse for what she had just done. As the police led her away, Sophia's eyes were empty, as if her soul had detached from any emotion. Her steps were slow and heavy, as if carrying an unbearable weight, yet she didn't utter a single cry. Her inner world seemed to have completely shut down as she let fate push her toward an unknown abyss. Some neighbors, witnessing this, quickly turned their eyes away and lowered their heads, as though she had suddenly become someone unrecognizable, even terrifying. Meanwhile, Emily stood in the doorway, her body trembling, her face pale. She couldn't believe her world had collapsed in an instant. She had once thought she was merely seeking brief solace, but now everything had ended in such an extreme way. Her son Jack stood by her side, clutching her hand tightly, clearly unable to comprehend the chaos around him. Emily's heart was filled with deep fear and confusion. She didn't know how to face what had just occurred. The tranquility of the community was utterly shattered, and the harmony that once existed had vanished without a trace. Neighbors began to gossip in hushed voices, focusing on the unbelievable violent incident. People started to talk about Sophia and James's marriage, and some even began to question the secrets hidden behind seemingly perfect families. The once close-knit relationships between neighbors grew tense, as everyone started to reevaluate the lives of those around them, wondering if those seemingly happy families were truly as perfect as they appeared. "Did you hear? James and Sophia's marriage always seemed perfect," someone whispered in the store. "Who would have thought something like this could happen? She actually killed James?" Another person responded, their voice filled with disbelief. And this was only one of many conversations happening across the community. Everyone was processing the shocking incident in their own way. The peaceful life they once knew had been shattered, and all of them were forced to face the undeniable truth. The world beneath the surface was far more fragile than anyone had ever imagined. Sophia's trial attracted widespread attention, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, with media cameras focused on every participant. On the first day of the trial, Sophia sat in the defendant's chair, her expression calm, as though she had already prepared herself for everything. Her defense attorney argued that her actions were not premeditated, but rather the result of prolonged emotional pressure and mental stress. The lawyer emphasized that Sophia's emotions had gradually spiraled out of control due to the indifference and neglect in her long marriage, and when the explosion finally came, all her anger and frustration were channeled into an uncontrollable impulse. The lawyer further pointed out that Sophia had always loved James, but over the years, her emotional needs had been ignored, leading to the breaking point where she could no longer handle the situation. In contrast, the prosecution presented a completely different view. They argued that Sophia's actions were premeditated, fueled by anger and jealousy. The prosecution contended that she was aware of her husband's affair with Emily, but chose not to confront it directly. Instead, she resorted to violence as a form of revenge. They argued that her actions were not a result of emotional outburst, but rather a cold and calculated act of retaliation, and that such behavior constituted murder. In court, the debates between the two sides were intense and direct. The defense lawyer fought to secure a lighter sentence for Sophia, while the prosecution firmly believed that her violent behavior should not be excused. Emily took the stand as a witness, her face marked by guilt and fear. In her testimony, she said, "I never imagined it would come to this. I myself was trapped in this relationship, torn between desire and fear. I never thought things would escalate to this point. Everyone got hurt, including me." In the end, the case quickly became national news and sparked widespread discussion across society. Many people held differing views on whether Sophia should bear full responsibility for her actions. Some believed that she had been under emotional oppression for so long that her actions were out of her control, while others felt that, regardless of her emotional struggles, violence should never be the answer to resolving problems. The case not only became a focal point of public attention but also triggered widespread discussions about marriage, emotions, and violence. After the trial concluded, Sophia's fate remained uncertain, and the case became a heavy topic, provoking deep reflection both in the public and legal circles. Riverside was once a symbol of peace and harmony. The lawns were neatly trimmed, the streets quiet, and the residents greeted each other, living lives that seemed to follow an unchanging, peaceful rhythm. However, Sophia's violent outburst struck like a thunderclap, shattering the seemingly calm skies. Every household in the community began to re-examine their surroundings. The once open and friendly neighborhood relationships suddenly became tense and silent. Everyone started to question, beneath the perfect facade, what was the true nature of their own family life. After Sophia's trial, she was sentenced and sent to prison. Behind the iron bars, Sophia faced the crimes she had committed, her heart filled with regret and helplessness. She began to realize that her actions had not only destroyed her own family, but had also deeply hurt the innocent Emily and her own children. Sophia often reflected alone, pondering how her once beautiful marriage had gradually fallen apart with the passage of time. She had neglected communication with James and ignored her own emotional needs until everything spiraled out of control. This incident also led Riverside's residents to reflect on the true meaning of marriage, emotions, and trust. The family once considered perfect was hiding such deep cracks and crises. Behind this story was not only the misunderstanding and betrayal between Sophia and James, but also the disappearing communication and emotional connection. This case reminded everyone that outward calm can mask a deeper storm, and if the emotional needs of each family member are not detected and addressed in time, they can eventually evolve into irreparable conflicts. Sophia's story provided a deep warning for the entire community. Her actions were not only the extreme result of emotional alienation, but also a tragic reflection of infidelity. Her despair and anger in some ways revealed the consequences of long-term neglect of communication and care. How can we prevent the breakdown of family relationships? How can we avoid emotional crises? These questions became a lingering concern in the hearts of every resident in Riverside. For Sophia, her tragedy might have been the only lesson to awaken others, and for every ordinary family, it served as a mirror, reminding people to cherish the ones they love and appreciate the trust and love that are hard to come by.